The Magicians Podcast is sponsored by Wyrick Nation. Sign up today for exclusive meet and greet opportunities, Wyrick Nation e-blasts, and 25% members-only discount on merchandise from the Steve Wyrick line of magic. Visit stevewyrick.com/Wyrick-Nation.
The Magicians Podcast is brought to you in proud association with the Magic Circle, Alakazam Magic, and Gigio.
It's just a different art form. You know, people are also removed from it. It's the other reason I found it so dull, is that ultimately it's the reason when people see you do magic live, they say, oh God, when it's on TV, I think it's just bullshit. It's because they're removed from the process. When it's live and it's in their hands, and it's real, or it's in their physical space, it's a very, very different feeling. It's a very, very different experience.
Yeah. Hey, yo, it's my life, my time, my rights, my rhymes, my grind, my struggle, hustle, sweat in my blood too. My predators smell fear, I smell a lot. My competitors flex here, cause they smelled I was hot. I want it all, excess, the sex, much success, stress us. I want it all, no less, so come on.
Welcome, my friends, to the Magicians Podcast. My name is Richard Young. Thank you for tuning in. As always, it's a very special week here on the podcast because my guest this week is quite the scoop because he never normally talks to magic publications or does interviews for magicians. I am honoured to have Ben Earl in my hot seat this week to talk about his career to date. We will get to the interview very shortly, but before we do, ladies and gentlemen, I need to have a little heart-to-heart with you. We need to have an honest chat, okay? Guys, seriously, what's been going on? For the past few weeks, the podcast has opened with an advert, supposedly from Steve Wyrick, offering 25% off meet and greet opportunities at his show. It's a gag, and none of you realised it was a joke. A few of you even got in touch to congratulate me on securing a new sponsor. It is, of course, a spoof advert designed to amuse you, and well, I'm sorry to say it didn't do that because none of you realised it was a gag. The gag, of course, was brilliantly put together by my great friend Rob James. As some of you know, it was my birthday a few weeks ago, and the advert was a gift from Rob to me for my birthday, and I thought it was so brilliant that I decided to add it to the start of the last 2 weeks' episodes, and yeah, I thought it was hilarious, and hopefully now you realise it's a joke that you will too. You'll think it's really funny. Anyway, it's always bad when you have to explain a joke, isn't it? Let's get to this week's episode. My guest is Ben Earl. He is without doubt one of the greatest sleight of hand magicians in the world. In fact, 2 of my very close friends, who I won't name, have said to me that they consider him the greatest sleight of hand magician in the world, and one of them really is an authority in the world of sleight of hand magic. In fact, he said to me, Richard, I've seen them all, and Ben is the best. Well, not only is he one of the world's greatest sleight of hand magicians, he was also on the pilot episode of Penn Teller, and off the back of that, he secured his own television series on Channel 4 here in the UK, a show called Trick Artist. We are honoured to have him here on the podcast this week. Sit back, relax, and enjoy over an hour in the company of the incredibly talented Ben Earl. So it's a lovely summer's day, and I'm outside in a lovely coffeehouse garden with Ben Earl. Here he is.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Ben, I just want to say, first of all, I feel really privileged that you've agreed to do this, because I know you put out so little with regards to interviews. I think you don't put out anything at all. Interviews for magic publications, interviews and things.
That's just because I'm inept. That's basically it.
Well, either way, I do feel very privileged you've agreed to sit down with me today. You've done so much incredible stuff, and hopefully we're going to get more of an insight just of looking at your work today. Hopefully actually we'll look at how you created that work, because your work's incredible, as everybody knows. So, and I want to start, if that's okay, with the sort of one of the first projects that sort of put you on the scene in magic.
Yeah.
Was your DVD set Past Midnight, which for those who have seen it, it's got an incredible body of work on it, some amazing thought processes, but actually I want to know about your life just before that point. How did you get to that point where that work came together? Was it just relentless rehearsal? Were you working it? what was your creative process for all the things that are on that DVD? I'm sorry, that's a really deep question. I hope you
I
can.
have no idea. It was, wow, I don't know really. It was it's like a distant memory in terms I can barely remember the stuff that's on it. But if memory serves me correctly, at the time I didn't really know what I was doing. You know, I'd been studying psychology at university, and I'd come out and I didn't know what I was going to do, and I certainly didn't want to be a magician or do anything in the magic world. Magic was just a fun hobby. It was something I was deeply obsessed with and passionate about, and I just go to conventions and drink. I'd been very heavily practiced drinking whilst being at university, so I'd kind of developed a load of new drinking skills. And so I just thought, well, this is cool. I get to occasionally go away to a convention now and again, get smashed, and then just do some card and coin tricks with people. And I think in that process, I ended up fooling quite a few people, and someone suggested, hey, maybe you should put some of this stuff on film. And at that point, I was interested in kind of, it's just because I'm insane, I didn't want to kind of put the stuff on film that I was doing. I was interested in kind of capturing all the stuff I'd previously done as a way of kind of putting an end cap on it. So most of the stuff that was on past midnight, even at that time when I filmed it, was stuff that I'd left behind, like in my kind of like teenage years.
Right.
So that's why I did it. So it was a way to just kind of document and keep all this stuff in one place. And yeah, I just kind of filmed it. I was very, very naive to the process. I didn't really care about what happened to it. I just thought it was interesting to film and then just let it go, really. I wasn't interested in kind of marketing it or lecturing it or using anything off the back of it. It was just a question of capturing a kind of period of time in my life.
Yeah.
And at that time I was interested in solving problems with methods. So like if you look at the material, 90% of the material isn't really connected, I don't feel, certainly not now from my perspective, connected to performance. It was connected to problem solving. So many of the routines, I would think, right, if I was to approach collectors or if I was to approach this certain routine, how would I technically solve this problem in a more efficient way? It wasn't really connected in any way to performing. You know, some aspects of it were, to be honest. There was some on there that some of the stuff, the psychological stuff, was more geared towards thinking, but on the whole, it was about problem solving. And so yeah, I put it out there because it had a lot of moves on there and a lot of techniques. Magicians seemed to respond to it and like it, but I never really felt the kind of need to. I never really wanted to talk about it or lecture about it because it was stuff I'd left behind. Yeah, I just did that, put it out there, and it seemed to be enjoyed, and that was that, really.
I suppose you very quickly you very quickly had a bit of a cult following, and magicians were raving about your skills and your abilities. Was that? I'm interested in your personality, actually, as well as all of your magic today. Did that make you feel a bit uncomfortable? Was that really what you wanted?
No. I think that, this is a sweeping generalisation, but like all generalisations, I think they're generally true. I think that a lot of people get into magic as Woody Allen called it, the revenge of the nerd or the revenge of the geek, the idea of getting one over on the bullies or stuff like that, or maybe you're deficient in another, maybe it's to pick up women or whatever it is. You see someone performing a trick and you see the reaction of it, and so you look at that and think, I would like to have that reaction. I was never kind of pulled in that way. I was pulled in because I came across a book years and years ago that I had all these moves in it. And I really thought to myself, this shouldn't be. How can like sleight of hand moves or the ability to kind of make balls or coins vanish, how can that be a legal thing? I don't know. I was an idiot. I was 12 years old. Somehow I thought sleight of hand was illegal. So I was kind of pulled into the kind of intellectual curiosity with the process of magic, of how can you make. You say to a normal person, how do you make a coin disappear in your hand, or how could you really do that? There was something like intellectually really interesting about it to me that was disconnected from the process of performing it to someone. So for me, that was the main driver. So even when I put this stuff out to magicians, I'm happy they loved it. It is flattering if someone really loves something, but I was more interested in leaving it and moving on and doing the next thing that I want to do, rather than kind of use that love or that momentum. So I end up just constantly finding myself doing something. Magicians seem to like it, but then I've already moved on.
You mentioned at the beginning there that it was a long time ago, and you're not an old guy now. You were really young when you put that out, and I'm really interested to see or to understand how on earth you got so good at such a young age, and you were coming up with moves and things like that at such a young age. What was the process, Ben? Was it, do you believe yourself you have a bit of a gift for it, or is it just hard work?
I don't believe in talent. I don't believe in those things. I think that it comes down to a process of how you approach a subject and how you train and how you work. I think that, to be honest, there will be a difference in scale. There will be people that do have a little bit more, and some people that definitely have a little bit less. Some people can barely walk, let alone do moves. But to be honest, for me, I think that I seem to have a natural affinity to it on the basis that I approached it very differently. I found very quickly that my approach to sleight of hand was very, very different to how other magicians were doing it. They would read a book, look at a move, rehearse these techniques, maybe do it in front of a mirror, try and get it looking smooth, and that sounds like it's right, but I think there are fundamental problems in those approaches. I think what they do is they encode rigidity. I think they encode a sense of a static mind and a static body. And so I used to try and force myself out of comfort zones. So the way in which I practiced would be very different. I would try and find ways of breaking rhythms and breaking patterns. I would try and practice in ways that were physically awkward. I would put myself in very, very testing conditions that I was very, very unfamiliar with and I was very inexperienced with, and I would find a way to improvise and find a solution out, so that I was constantly having to be present. So I was constantly having to be in the moment.
I see.
And in that process, I think there is a real feedback loop between your hands, your mind, your sense of timing, that is natural, or getting much closer to what is really natural. And I kind of almost instinctively was doing that when I first got into magic, purely because it felt like that's what happens in something like sport. You can practice and drill, but ultimately when you play, it's a form of improvisation. So you have to have all of the skills and ideas and knowledge and strategy embedded so deeply that you can let them go, so that you can improvise. And so I just kind of naturally assumed that is the most sensible way to practice routines, is to embed all of the techniques to a fundamental level, at a kind of satisfactory level, and then push yourself and allow yourself to have to find out different moments of timing. And in that process, it encourages relaxation in the body, which allows technique to flow more smoothly. I mean, what I'm talking about is, as soon as you start defining moments, what they mean, you end up contradicting yourself. It's a much broader subject than that, and it's something that now I kind of talk about, something called neo-movement, but it's which I'm sure we'll get onto, not to get into too much detail now, but there's a fundamental approach to performing, to thinking, to practicing, which I think cultivates and develops a more streamlined, more efficient, more realistic, more deceptive, not only technical approach, but timed approach.
And this is more sort of technique based. I know also you did an interesting project a few years ago about the truth element of magic, and about how ultimately we're the only people in the world who can lie and people don't mind.
Right.
Are
you talking about the essay?
Yeah, the essay which you wrote.
Okay.
Yeah, which was about the truth element of magic. Where do you, Ben? Where do you separate the practical side of the skills which you've learned, and also then the psychology of the performance as well? What you say, what you do, all those kind of things. What bit do you really?
Can't expect to give away my secrets.
That's for free. Yeah, hopefully. Which bit did you sort of focus on more when you were just, jamming and learning stuff early on?
I think early days it was a combination of both, and I would go through periods where I was focusing heavily on technique, and then other times I was focusing heavily on psychology and timing, and then there would be periods of time where it kind of melded together. It's like a very, very fluxing, movable set of strategies that were kind of unconscious. But I definitely went through periods where all I did was mentalism stuff, a lot of stuff to do with suggestion, and studying psychology meant that I was kind of taking a lot of the inspiration from what I thought was potentially possible to do with attention, perception, and influence, and how you can use that within the structure of essentially a conjuring effect. And so I ended up spending a lot of time doing a lot of that stuff, and then I kind of went back into doing card stuff and doing heavy gambling things, and then I think the state I'm at now is where I suppose I've embraced what I feel is the true nature of what magic is about, which is about, you're essentially using rational skills, real skills, to simulate the impossible. And so, for me, all magic is psychological, because you have thinking human beings watching it, perceiving, creating expectations or assumptions about what you're doing, having to perceive what's going on. So every movement you make, every action, every choice has psychological implication. And so a realization of that made me realize that even the most kind of fundamental thing, even a double lift, is actually quite an elegant psychological game. And so at a fundamental level, I started thinking, well, there's real depth and beauty psychologically within even what we would consider a very, very kind of standard piece of straightforward magic that you would find in, say, Royal Road. And so I started investing heavily in those processes and thinking, how much can I like squeeze out? There was a really interesting interview with Marcel Marceau, who was talking about limitation, and he said that one of the reasons that he can end up expressing so much is because as a mind you're so extremely limited. So you're forced to try and explore every potential avenue within your art. And so I suddenly started thinking, well, why not do that? Why not purposely limit myself and say, I'm going to try and create an entire effect around just the turn of a card or just the movement of a coin. So instead of just going, well, I can already do that, how much bigger can I make that? I don't just mean theatrically or doing it on a stage, but how much more can I understand about what the implications are of every move, how I can make certain moments more kind of deceptive, how I can make them more realistic. And so I started kind of just investing a whole load more time into simple structures. And I found this deep well of like psychological richness, which is potentially there. And so I think that over time, I never started looking at gambling material or I'm a card guy or a mentalist, or I just started looking at magic as being all the same bloody thing. It's just all the same. And so I stopped caring as to whether I was doing a card trick, whether it's the ambitious card, or whether it's a piece using suggestion. I no longer cared, because fundamentally it's the same stuff. So I just started looking at all simple structures as being potential, like really rich wells of like psychological like beauty or psychological value. And then once you've, let's say for example it's the movement of a coin from hand to hand, and let's say you try and work out all these psychological touches and moments and timings to make that more realistic, you then have to start looking at the movements and the techniques you're using and what psychological implication each of those have, how you move your body in that process, how you engaged with the coin, how you engaged with them. And so the whole process just became this minefield of potential. And I'm obviously not talking about how you present that and how you get entertainment value out of that. That's another discussion. But my true obsession is just the deceptive act itself. Just to make it almost like real magic.
Yeah.
Ultimately, if I do something for someone, I don't want to make it mildly amusing. I want it to look like 100% like real magic. And not because I'm trying to convince them I have magic powers. That is the art. The art is taking these rational skills and creating that experience for them. And real magic does exist, but it exists in the dimension of experience. They will experience that. That's what the art is, using rational things, timing, psychology, misdirection, in order to create that within them. So, I think a lot of magicians are scared about someone, they're trying to hide the fact that, okay, they just switched this envelope, or they just used this chair to switch this thing, or they just did, it's like they feel guilty about the fact that they're doing all those things, where those things are absolutely profoundly beautiful,
I'm listening to this, and we've only just started, but the passion which you talk...
I'm so sorry, I get deep quick.
And the depth of your thought process pretty much is unparalleled, I think, by any other magician I've spoken to. But actually, I've got to ask a deeper question, and I do wonder if the depth of your thinking at times sometimes must have led to a little bit of unhappiness, particularly when you start doing things like television, where it's so controlled, and they're telling you what to do, and you've got time constraints, and we can't do this because of X, Y, and Z. Let's start with Penn Teller Flawless, if that's okay. I understand that they chased you to be on that show. It wasn't like everyone else auditioned.
Yeah.
They came after you, and
Yeah.
you weren't interested. So you reversed the psychology on them straight away. Did you really want to do it? Why did you do it?
No, I didn't. And it's not. You mentioned there about unhappiness. It's not really unhappiness. I mean, I'm constantly seeking new challenges. So it's like I said earlier on, like in a way, anything that's challenging, whether it's an uncomfortable process or there are problems with it, a challenging process I find quite intellectually stimulating. So I found the notion of it relatively kind of interesting, but it was brand new. I mean, the one that I was on was a special. It hadn't been anywhere in the world, so I had no idea what it was. All I knew it was, Penn and Teller sitting down and going to be judging whether or not you could fool them, and it just didn't really seem like a challenge I really cared about. I just thought, well, so what? If I go on there and fool them or don't fool them, it just didn't really seem that interesting to me. And they kind of chased me for a good couple of months, and I said no for quite a while. And then eventually I suddenly thought about something I could do to challenge myself. So there's as people are probably aware, there's the routine that I did was essentially trying to find the aces from a shuffle deck. There's no trick to it, and that's one of the reasons I did it. Is I thought, I'm not going to go on and do a trick. I'm just going to literally use their own method. I'm going to tell them what I'm doing. I'm going to keep it open, and I'm just going to do exactly that. There is no trick. So, but I knew I could do that effect, but I'd never done it, with in front of 700 people, with 15 cameras, under the bright lights on a stage, with 2 people judging, but a magician. If I can do it under those conditions, and control my kind of adrenaline or control any of those processes, then that felt really interesting to me. I didn't care what happened or whatever. I was more interested in seeing what I could do in that moment. And so I thought, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that particular effect. And it ended up proving to be 1,000 times more challenging than I could possibly have imagined, because the teller had essentially sat on the deck for 3 hours. So when I actually got the deck, it was warm. So all of the cards were like soft. They had no kind of tensile strength or snap. They were soft. And you actually don't see it on the show, but he shuffles them, mushes them around, does essentially a wash. But they cut that out because of time. So, but you can see where the edit point is. So it looks like he just hands me a deck and then I spread it. But he genuinely shuffled the pack. I took it off him, I spread it out, and everything felt fine. And then I'm essentially going through my process, square them up. And my very, very first time I start moving the cards, they're just like, anything I described, they're like ham, they're like meat. They're just like floppy. And I just knew that most of the techniques that I use weren't going to work. So I had to improvise on the fly ways of peeking, glimpsing, coming in and out, while still trying to keep the style of it fluid. So it was 1,000 times more challenging. In reality, it doesn't look like that. In reality, it looks, I don't ever look at the cards, I never peek, I never do anything. I just memorize them once and do it. Yeah, it was extremely challenging.
I watched it again last night, and one of the things in the comments, Penn talks about your, I'm not quoting exactly, but he says he likes your cocky style and delivery. Right. And actually, I'm sort of watching it, and I didn't know about the thing with the cards, but I can see that. That's serious pressure. Yeah. And did you? I guess what I'm really asking is like, sort of what you've already asked. You did it because you wanted to put yourself in a pressured environment?
Yes, that's right. So I thought, if I can do it under those conditions, then I can do that. I know I can do it.
Yeah.
It's like you hear, when it comes to like fighting, mixed martial arts, UFC, anything, or any form of martial arts, you hear like, certain kung fu people talking about fighting, or all different martial arts. And ultimately, you don't know what you're talking about unless you've had a fight. Unless you can put it into practice, you don't know what you're talking about. Because when you go into a fight, you don't know what it's like, what the adrenaline's like, what the pressure's like. A real fight is different from standing in front of a class saying, look, if they put the hand here, I would do this. Well, would you? I don't know. Let's see what it's like in a real fight. The ultimate test is reality. And so I felt that, of course I can do this sitting at home. But if I can do this under the most stringent, rigid conditions possible, under that pressure, under that time where it has to work. You know, you've essentially wheeled in the block of art. You've done everything. You've set it up. If I can do it under those conditions, then everything else is absolutely easy. So it was about a learning process for me. It was about putting myself in a position where I could experience that and develop and learn. I didn't care what happened or what it meant, if I fooled them or didn't. So I was putting myself under pressure on purpose, and like I said, it was 1,000 times more challenging than it ever has been before or since, because the cards were so awful. And you know, also the other thing is, in that process you're also still having to think about beat and rhythm and timing. So I'm having to also think about how to structure and move ahead in the process in order to keep the rhythm. It's not easy.
I've got to ask about the trick itself, because I mean,
Yeah.
it is insane to watch as a magician. Like you said, we kind of get the gist by the end. I think a lot of magicians go, well, I think he just genuinely really did that. How on earth did you learn that process of being able to look at a shuffled deck of cards and then to, you know, transfer the cards that you need to...
I'll tell you very simply, ignorance.
Okay.
I heard about John Scarney when I was a kid, and I heard that he could take 4 aces from a shuffle deck, and I believed it.
Okay.
And so I could never find his method anywhere. It wasn't in print. I since then have located or found what he was doing, and on the whole, he was essentially doing it how most people do it. You know, having a quick look, removing the jokers, and then going ahead. But I didn't know that, so I just assumed that was a possibility. And so I approached it and found multiple solutions. I think there's an interesting lesson there, which is, you know, if you approach something and if you think something's impossible, it's going to severely limit your capacity to achieve it or even get close to it. So often I just I don't care if something's possible, not possible, if it can be done, can't be done, if it hasn't been done before. I just try and think about what I want to achieve, and then I just try and achieve it. And with that, I mean, it's a technical exercise as well. It was an exercise in technical masturbation in a way. You know, there are far better ways of doing it that are simpler, far simpler. But for me, it was, in order for me to be able to simulate and do the other methods properly, I need to know what it really feels like doing it for real. So yeah, but I'm just mental, I don't know. I'm just a bit weird.
Where did the idea of the photo come from? With the, you know, obviously you start at the beginning, you take it full circle, you show the idea of
I don't know, about a week before, I think I just thought to myself, I've got to have some form of structure, so I just thought I've got to have some reason to do this. So I just do a photo and end with that behind my back somehow to give it some sense of bullshit narrative. But that was it, I think. I can't really remember.
Obviously, I think unlike what happens nowadays when they're banging episodes of Fool Us Out all the time, you were one of the originals. I assume you got to speak to Penn and Teller afterwards, did you?
Yeah, we'll speak to them.
What did they think of your bit when they finally realised what it was you were doing?
Well, I think at the time they didn't know what was happening, and Johnny Thompson knew, because he knew what I was doing, and so at the time they just assumed I was doing full shuffles, and there was something that they didn't understand that I was really just doing it for real. And so yeah, we're having those conversations afterwards, and they're good guys. They're professionals, experienced, knowledgeable. And, it was all good and fun.
The Magicians Podcast brought to you in association with the Magic Circle, the world's premier magical society. Are you ready to join the world's most exclusive magic club? Visit themagiccircle.co.uk to find out more.
Free for 30 days. Be a pro. Get Gigio.
Big news coming out of Gigio HQ this week, ladies and gentlemen. The board of directors have met and they have decided to rename the Gigio website after the final 2 words of the most famous jingle in the magic industry, the one you just heard. The final 2 words are Get Gigio, and that is the new website for Gigio. It's getgigio.com. Write it down. Visit it right now, my friends, because a free 30-day trial awaits you when you visit that website. If you don't know what I'm talking about, well, Gigio is a web-based software designed for professional and semi-professional entertainers anywhere in the world. It will save you hours in the office every single week. It generates PDF contracts and invoices. It updates the diary on your phone automatically. It tracks your payments. It allows you to schedule email to your clients. And a lovely new feature is venue lookup. If you frequently visit the same venues rather than having to annoyingly type them out every single time you get a gig, Gigio will remember the venues you have visited most frequently and you'll be able to look them up. I'm talking absolute sense, my friends. Visit the website right now, getgigio.com, and take your free 30-day trial. Gigio is spelled Gigio.
Whether you're new to magic or a seasoned professional, Alakazam Magic are here to help. Alakazam have been supplying magic to magicians for well over 20 years. Not only do we carry all the latest and greatest magic tricks, books and DVDs, but we also manufacture one of the finest ranges of magic tricks in the world. The Alakazam name is synonymous with great customer service, educated advice and honesty. So if you're shopping for new magic, make sure you check out our website, www.alakazam.co.uk, or pay a visit to our fully stocked shop.
Is it fair to say that Flawless was your big break in terms that it did Flawless lead to Trick Artist, or was Trick Artist already brewing in the background before then?
I definitely wouldn't refer to it as a big break, because that's based on the assumption that that in itself is the aim, or something else. It was something which led to other opportunities. It definitely was a catalyst to other things. And since then, I'm now doing many, many more things that have come from other catalysts in other areas. I mean, it's the butterfly effect. It's all madness. But I mean, definitely that process led on to me talking to Channel 4 and going into a process with them. And that again was another set of challenges, which I was like, well, what's going to make me uncomfortable? What's interesting? My brain isn't geared right for kind of thinking about promoting myself in the right way, or I constantly am just thinking about what's challenging. What do I want to look at on an intellectual level? How can I go ahead and do it? So I go through some processes are more frustrating than others, some are more stimulating than others, and so they're just a series of different challenges that all present their own unique problems. That if I was to do it again, the problems would be different. I think I find that really, really interesting. It makes me feel like I'm growing and learning. I don't know the answers. I'm not even close. So I just want to do more things that challenge me.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, going back to something you just said then, it's changing the subject a little bit, but you sort of mentioned it was assuming that was the goal. What can I ask you, what was the goal then? So before you had this TV show, and now you've done a TV show, has it changed? Where what's Ben Earl's ultimate goal with his magic before his own show and afterwards?
I think, to be honest, I never wanted to be a professional magician. I never wanted to do magic for a living. It never occurred to me to do it. The idea of doing a television show was never the aim, never the goal. And as a result, weirdly enough, these things tend to happen to me without me ever going for them. So once I went through that process, I'd done it. They wanted me to do more stuff, but I just didn't want to do it. I just felt that I wanted to move on to the next challenge. Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm trying to constantly find new challenges, and I don't really care if it's commercial or non-commercial, or people know about it or don't know about it. It's about my own kind of personal enjoyment of it. I have to find a way to earn money in that process, but that's always like fifth down on the list.
Can we talk about Trick Artist a bit?
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's not many magicians in the world who ever get what you've had, which is a major television channel putting the full machine behind you and putting you on their channel prime time. Let's go right back to the beginning, when the process is put on the table, or they make the offer, or they say we're going to make a pilot. Or listening to everything you've already said today, I can imagine you had some very challenging conversations with them about what you would and would not allow it to be. Can I ask at the very beginning, what your vision for it was?
My vision for it was very, very different, but it's like trying to put a square peg in a round hole. Often they already have ideas of the box that they want you to go in, and so it's all about trying to make it fit that box. And so it's a complex, it's a challenging process, but I just looked at that as a challenging process. I looked at that as going, well, this is interesting to experience this. I learned in a very short period of time, I learned a phenomenal amount about the process of making magic, the commercialization of it, the process of making a television show, the different roles, the different levels of influence that can happen, from the people funding to producers to line managers to commissioners, and all of that process is its own unique set of challenges. And it wasn't really intellectually that stimulating. I found it, to be honest, very dull. It's very boring.
Oh, really?
Really, really boring, because it's very, very challenging, but after a while, it's just, it's just not that interesting. I just didn't find it that interesting, and so I found that I got bored very quickly. And so I was just looking for a way to get it over as quickly as possible and move on to the next thing. And yeah, I think that pretty much adequately sums up that process. It's not that I was reluctant in it, but I never asked for it, and I never really went for it. It just kind of happened. It's the story of my life. Things end up happening to me, and then I kind of deal with them and then move on.
Yeah.
So yeah.
There was a decision made, obviously, when the show was being put together, that the magic was all going to be legit, unlike a lot of television magic. But you were on prime time Channel 4, and you were ultimately always going to be compared to other television magicians who don't do things legitimately, and so potentially the magic would look a little bit weaker as a result, because your methods were at times in view on the screen.
It's a different art form.
Yeah.
It's an entirely different art form. Magic on television is its own art, and I was naive going into that process. I learned a lot of stuff. It was really, really interesting. I mean, look, you got to remember that the magic in the real world, you cannot rewind time. Really, the art is about affecting memory, because memory is just attention in the past. So when you are performing, you are affecting memory. Everything you're doing is doing that. When you have to do it on television, people can rewind. So what's your decision? You have to edit. Now, if you're editing, when you're doing those cuts, now the major consideration is how you're editing. And there is also a genuine art to that, and there are multiple ways of doing it. I think that there are some people, I think, that have done that process really well. I think Blaine has done it very, very well. But it's just a different art form. People are also removed from it. It's the other reason I found it so dull, is that ultimately it's the reason when people see you do magic live, they say, oh God, when it's on TV, I think it's just bullshit. It's because they're removed from the process. When it's live and it's in their hands and it's real, or it's in their physical space, it's a very, very different feeling. It's a very, very different experience. When you're watching it on the television, you're removed from it. It's a different thing. It's far better. Just get an actor and Industrial Light and Magic in. It's really all that's relevant. The real art of magic becomes less relevant, I think, to some extent on television. It's a different product, and so I found it less interesting magically.
You mentioned like Industrial Light and Magic and people who do special effects. I mean, going away from your early work where you're putting out amazing close-up work, fast forward a few years, you're making a show, you're jumping off of roofs and moving roofs from one car to another. What was that like doing that? I assume first of all, it's out your comfort zone, right? You've not done stuff like that.
It was
before.
just great fun. I got to do a load of really, really crazy shit in a very short period of time, and it was really, really good fun. It was just a mad experience, and I met a lot of people and learnt a lot of stuff, and it was just cool. Because I something to tell my kids that I spent 12 weeks learning to jump off of buildings. That was great fun, and learning how to fall through the air in multiple different ways, and working with stuntmen and driving stunt cars around. It was great fun. It was what it was, and it was just a period of time for me to test and experiment and get paid and have a laugh.
Yeah.
But like I said, ultimately I didn't, on that level, as the kind of adolescent side of myself, found a lot of that stuff really fun. But kind of on an artistic level, magically speaking, I found it really quite dull, and really quite boring. And there's also so many parts. There's 1,000 moving parts to a machine, And it's like you can go through this thing and have this beautiful thing all choreographed and put together, and then on the day, camera packs fail, and then they have to film it again. But now it's not a surprise for the people in front of you, so you have a different group of people, and now the moment's different, and the light goes, then you have sound problems, and the whole there's so much waiting around. It's when you look at the thing on the screen, you're watching this tightly put together thing, whatever it is. But the actual reality of going through that process is very, very different. And the thing is, I'm not being negative about it. There's some people that love it, but it just wasn't for me. So I tried to do everything I could once I'd gone through it to either change that process and do something very, very different, or stop doing it entirely. So that was really the choice.
Just one final thing I'd like to ask you about it, which is he's a friend of the podcast actually. Ben Hart was one of your main consultants on the show. Ben's been on the podcast.
Yeah.
How was it working with Ben? Your relationship? I'm fascinated by the idea of you two working together, because you're both very interesting, deep-thinking magicians.
Yeah. Well, I tried to specifically work with, again, to create something different, work with people that I would never have normally worked with. So instead of picking normal consultants or anyone else, I just thought, well, let's just pick, slightly. But Ben is very, very funny, very, very strange, unique person who he was brilliant to have around, because he brought so much levity and lightness to the process. Basically, we'd take the piss out of him all day long, and he loved it. And he's great. Ben's great. He's a good thinker, good creator, good performer. He's all those things. And he was a good guy to have around. And that was one of the other things. I just enjoyed the process of. I mean, most of my days were spent doing filming, and then in the end getting smashed in whatever local pub was there, and drinking myself into oblivion. And Ben was always there. He's also he gets drunk quicker than anyone else I've met. So it was good fun.
You haven't seen me have half a shandy yet, though. That'll come a bit later this afternoon. You can confirm or deny this rumour. It's a rumour that's done the mills with regards to your TV show, and you're the only person who can actually answer the question. Is it true that during the studio segments of the show, that if you spotted magicians in the audience, you were throwing them out?
No. Well, I specifically said, or what I really wanted is I wanted a lay audience. The reason is that my feeling is when you have magicians, they take out four people. They take out the person in front of them, behind them, to the left and to the right, because they don't react, because they're not in the same mental space. What they're doing is they're just watching. And so often they don't give anything to that process. And also I'm massively, massively suspicious of magicians that would want to go and watch magic being filmed. Just to me, it feels really weird. I would never go and do that. So I specifically put things out saying, look, we just want to have normal people. Not in any way suggesting that magicians aren't normal, but yes, I am. They're weirdos. We're all weirdos. So I specifically put that out there, and then when we went through a lot of the process, I think there were quite a number of magicians that tried to sneak through, and there were, I think the whole magic, or not even just the magic team, the whole process was geared up to trying to stop them come in. So it wasn't as if I was going around chucking them out, but there were lots of people, for example, when you had a lot of the spectators together doing tricks on other people that were about to go in.
Kidding.
No. But, so I mean, it was a bizarre process. So they ended up getting farmed out. So I suppose yes is probably the answer. It's their own bloody fault.
Now, what's interesting is obviously you had the process of the Channel 4 and the whole machine being put behind you. Obviously, that's really cool. And then the show goes out, and you sort of disappeared for a while, if you don't mind me saying. I think people wondered where you'd gone. What was in the sort of year or two after the Trick Artist? What were you filling your time with?
I was still here.
You're still alive. You're still here today.
Well, I mean, I suppose that if you go back before that, I was just as present before that process as I was after. So it's not as if I disappeared, but there was a certain expectation of what that anyone else would do after that process. But I just went back to the process that I was doing.
Yeah.
So I just spend my time creating and performing and doing, pursuing the things I'm interested in. And I just went back to that process.
Well, I've heard a rumour in more recent times you've made a decision to not consume any magic content that's put out by anybody else.
Yeah.
So you don't read forums, you don't watch DVDs, you don't keep an eye on what tricks are out.
No.
Nothing at all. You're just in your own world. First of all, is that true?
Yep.
And why did you make that decision?
Very, very simply, because I wanted to discover my own thoughts. I think that everything you consume influences you in some respects. So you tend to find there are these trends, when a new any card at any number comes out, whatever it is, everyone is playing with those concepts, and I felt to myself that I want to know what I think, what I feel, what I want to look at, what I want to discover, what I want to think about. And I don't want to be biased by everyone else. Now I'm relatively well read, and so back in the day I was I've read all of Marlowe, all the classic textbooks, everything from Rufus Steele and you name it. I've gone through that process, and my fundamental knowledge is good. And I felt like, well, if I've got that, if I understand all the stuff from Royal Road and Expert Card Technique and Erdnase and and all of Marlowe and Werner stuff, do I really need to know about all the latest things that are coming out? Not really. So I just thought, well, I'll just stop it. And so I basically got rid of all my books, got rid of everything. And I wasn't really going on forums or anything like that before anyway, but I just didn't consume anything, literally anything. And I still don't. It's probably been about 5. That actually started before Trick Artist.
Okay.
So, but it's probably been about 5 or so years that I've been doing that. Now, occasionally I see something but it comes through people I quote unquote trust, who say to me, Ben, you have to see this. You literally have to see this. And they pay heavily if I disagree. If afterwards it's horrendous, I won't speak to them for weeks. But occasionally I'll see something. I'm talking literally like last year I saw a download that someone had produced. I saw one last year that someone swore that I had to see. So that's as much as I consume. The rest of my time is spent looking at other domains. So I spend a lot of time looking at psychology and movement and other areas of interest. And I'm more interested in looking across domains, the diffusion of influence across other areas. The stuff in the magic world I just find less interesting, less stimulating.
So let's talk about the new thing which you've done some lectures on in Scandinavia.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's something you've actually been doing for a long, long time, but you're only starting to talk about it to magicians now, and this is the Neo movement thing. Can you give us, first of all, there'll be some people listening to this who have never heard of it before.
Yep.
Can you give us a bit of an overview of it first of all?
Yeah, well, basically it's a convenient fiction. It's just a name that I have given to a process that I've been essentially doing for a very, very long time. It's like we hinted at the beginning. It's new ways of practicing and thinking and approaching a subject. But what I've done is essentially collect all those ideas together and also formulate it into a system that can be taught and can be learned. Really, ultimately, it's a new way of approaching magic, a new way of thinking about psychology, a new way of thinking about physical movement. And like I said, all magic is psychological because they're human beings thinking and perceiving. All of it has psychological implication, and all magic is movement because you're physically having to enable the magic. You're having to interact with props. So magic is psychology and movement. And so I was concerned with really looking into what really is at the heart of true natural movement. You start looking at Vernon, and Vernon talked about natural moves, but he never really defined what natural meant or how to do it. And if you don't kind of define the terms of your philosophy, you don't really have one. And when he started looking at, if you do this, ask someone to hold. He did a thing with a top change in a matchbox and created rational movement. It was a step forward from what was previous. But it's not really the whole answer, because at the moment you define what a natural move is, it's no longer natural, it's mechanical. So what it is simulated naturalness. And so what I was interested in was what's real naturalness? Where do you find instinct? Where do you find those places where you can act intuitively, but still have something which is entirely deceptive? It sounds like an impossible problem, but it's not. And so I spend my life looking at movement in other domains. So for example, if you look at, say, dance, if you look at dance, there are some really interesting, not that I don't actually dance, but I find it, unless I've had too much to drink, we'll see. But if you look at dance, you have like theorists like Martha Graham, who was one of the people who talks about putting physicality and weight back into the body, and the difference between that and ballet. Ballet is about lightness, but it takes immense strength and control to appear to be so effortless. That's interesting, because there are techniques and ways of affecting that. You can look at Wayne McGregor, who's another choreographer who talks about physical thinking, or Merce Cunningham, who would talk about what is the language of dance itself without it being subservient to another art form, and what are the process of analysing that. Really interesting. And dance is about expression. All movement inherently is about expression. That's what the movement is there for. Yoga, the movement within yoga is about internal awareness. The movements are designed to give you an internal awareness of your own limits, your own sensations. The movement of puppetry, for example, is about subconscious movement. If you can it's the subconscious movement of the puppet which makes it come to life. It's not the overt moves, it's those subconscious. All of these have little links to magic. Sport, the movements in sport are about affecting attention and perception. You're having to defeat opponents. The difference between that and magic, what makes magic so interesting, is you're also having to affect attention in the past. You're also having to affect memory. But all of these domains have got really interesting little bits. Some of them, jiu-jitsu, the boxing. There's so many areas where movement has these kind of beautiful, kind of ubiquitous laws that I think can be carried through everything. And I think the movement in magic is generally quite bad. It's very stiff, it's very static, and even if it's rational, we all know those people that do kind of apparently quote unquote perfect magic. They've thought through every move and but it ends up looking robotic, ends up looking static. And so there are ways of approaching the subject in terms of thinking that can change the way you think, but also there are ways that you can physically act and train which develop real skill towards real movement. And so what neo-movement essentially is about developing a deeper realism and a deeper deceptiveness within your action, within your approach, within your thinking, within your movement, within everything. And ultimately, to do that frees you up to perform. It frees you up to stop thinking about the technique. It frees you up to connect with power or connect with humor, whatever it is you want. So for me, I'm extremely interested in that process. I'm extremely interested in talking about it, communicating it. So it's what I did this tour across Scandinavia. I did it at a very light level. So I did it a kind of reduced form of it, and it went really, really well, and people loved it. And so then I've started putting together larger seminars with, I did a 7-hour one recently in Bath. I'm in the process of trying to organise some more in this country, and I've got some more plans that I'm keeping secret at the moment, but I have some larger plans for it. But like I said, it's not a theoretical framework, it's an applied system. It's a way to physically train and get better, literally get better.
And this can go across all types of magic?
All magic. Someone asked me a really interesting question when I was in Sweden. They said, well, when should you start learning it? And I think actually it's not good to learn immediately. You need to get into magic first and learn all the basic movements, the underlying principles, and then start learning this. And because ultimately, once you know all the principles, techniques come out of principles. So you need to know all the fundamentals, the reasons for rational movement or natural action or logical sequences. You need to understand why they're all there in order to learn how to break them and how to become instinctive with that process. It's kind of difficult and it sounds strange to talk about, but it's been a very, very long period of time for me packaging all the stuff together in such a way where it's actually able to be communicated as a system. Before it was just a collection of madness in my head, whereas now I've essentially learned how to communicate it. And this might be an overstatement, but I think that everyone that experiences it improves. Some will improve more, some will improve less. It depends on how much they commit to the process, like anything. How much effort do you want to put in? But everyone will improve.
Could you give us an example at all of any of the thought processes which are involved with it without giving too much away?
It's difficult to, but I'll try. I suppose in one respect, it's like I said with, I use this example often when doing it. I talk about top changes just because it's an action that immediately, as soon as I say that word, everyone sees a pattern in their head. They see a pattern of movement. That pattern of movement that everyone sees in their head when you say top change, or you imagine yourself doing it, has actually 360 degrees. There's a fluxing ball. Both hands can move in multiple directions if you become responsive to it. You don't have to go through that same logical pattern each time. but you have to literally train the ability to move your hands in all those directions so that you can gesture in this way or that way, so that you can shrug and move, so that you can act. It's difficult to do verbally on a podcast, but I actually take people physically through a process where they feel that happening. Another kind of slight example, which you might be able to start seeing, is that if you watch magicians perform, if you just watch them, they remain very static. Their feet on the whole remain static. The head remains locked with the body. So, but really the reality is the head moves and the body follows. There's a kind of, it's looser, and if you watch people in real life, they shift weight. And so there is a deep undercurrent there of making it real and natural by just knowing how to shift your weight. There are some magicians that do it absolutely beautifully, naturally, but there aren't many of them, and they're not thinking about it. It's intuitive. But on the whole, when you watch magicians, it becomes very, very static, and they're in their heads thinking about the moves that are about to come. They've rehearsed their lines, they know the beats, they know the moments, so the process becomes very restrictive. So what the neo movement stuff is about broadening the knowledge and awareness of the potential patterns, the different patterns of movement that are available to you, and extending your pattern library, extending all of those things, so you can physically go through them and extend them and drill them so they become part of your muscle memory, and you can start feeling your body literally moving differently. It's for me, it's the true art of natural movement, because it's becoming natural in that moment. It's responsive, it's reactive. It's not just one predetermined forced set of sequences. It becomes reactive and responsive and softer.
And ultimately you're saying this isn't just going to make the magic more deceptive. It's also going to, the experience for the spectator.
Yes.
The improvement for the spectator is also that ultimately it just becomes more believable. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it starts to look like real magic. Sleight of hand disappears. Moves disappear.
Yeah.
Misdirection disappears. Timing disappears. There's none of that process is visual anymore. And also your moves can literally become better and smoother. And timing is everything. Look at sport. Yes, you do need to have technique. You do need to be able to do moves. You do need to understand principles. But the exact moment you time it, is it a split second before or a split second afterwards? Where is that exact moment? And how is the rest? I often ask people when they do a move, like a pass or a top change, I say, you do that really well. Normally when you do it, where are your feet? They just go, well, I don't know. Like, your whole body is responsible for everything you do, even though we tend to think about moves being isolated in hands, but your body is connected. All of it, how you move and look and use your arms, your eyes, your head, all of it is a complete system. So you have to think about how the entire body moves with a false transfer.
It's a shame this is a podcast, because what people can't see, and I will explain, is that when Ben started talking about neo movement, he lifted up his sunglasses, his eyes have become bright, he's smiling, and you're really obviously enthusiastic about this. How has it changed your magic, Ben? Obviously you're fully in with all these techniques and things. In terms of as your performance and your reactions, have they improved? Are you enjoying magic more as a result of knowing these techniques as well?
Well, there's another part of it which is about being able to switch out of being in your head. So instead of being in your head when you're performing, I want to be in the moment. I really want to feel that moment myself, and so I can become responsive to it, and I can feel the people, the group. Instead of kind of sitting there being in my head and there we go, madam, hold this, and I try and find a way to engage and become a real part of that group. It's kind of weird, like even talking about knowing that I'm on a podcast, knowing that the people that listen to this can't see anything. But on one level, I've kind of decoded aspects of what I've always done and put them into a formula that enables me to translate it. But in a large way, I've been trying to do this for many, many years, and it's thanks to Rune Clan, who's a close friend of mine, that I actually got the final piece of the puzzle, because I've been working out. I was thinking of writing a series of essays about it, and then Rune called me up one day and said to me, him and I both watch basketball religiously. We both kind of think that we're pretty good. But as Rune well knows, I smash him every time. But he called me up and said to me, look, is there any... We were watching Steph Curry play, and we were watching his training process, and he was doing all these drills and strange drills. And Rune said to me, it'd be interesting if we could create some drills that actually make you better, that could improve certain aspects of what you do, like they do in sport. And I realised when he said that those were actually the translation mechanisms of the theories that I had. And it was in that moment that I realised that was the mode by which I could translate it. So I then started frantically, just like it exploded. I disappeared for about a month, or longer than that, actually. I disappeared for about 4 months. And all I was doing was this process and was just putting everything in. And I started running this process with percussionists, fighters. So it's not just magicians I've used it with a lot of different people. And all of a sudden, it started making sense to me in terms of something I could teach. And I just became really, really quite proud of it. I became really, really excited. Basically what I'm doing as well is creating what I wish I could have had when I was a teenager. I wish. All I kept reading books or watching someone say do this and time it like this, and it never felt right, and ended up having to fudge my way and discover it myself. And so I'm kind of creating what I wish was there 10, 15 years ago. And so I'm really kind of excited to put people through that process. People coming into magic, brilliant. People that have been in magic a long, long time and think they already know, brilliant. I'm just super passionate and super excited by it.
So for people listening to this, where can they find out more about it? What's the first step to...
There's a Facebook page. If you go onto, I think it's just type in Neo Movement into Facebook, you'll find something on there. I've literally just put it up a few weeks ago. Maybe my website, benjaminl.com. You might find a little bit about it on there in the blog section. I will be announcing some more workshops. There will be some other stuff coming soon, which I can't mention right now, but there will be some other stuff coming. But yeah, I don't know. Just keep your ears out. Go to my website, and if you sign on to my subscribers list, you'll get like an email, and I'll tell people about what I'm doing. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm interested in doing at the moment, is teaching people this process.
You're, obviously, as everyone's heard over the last hour, you're a very deep thinker. You think about magic in a way that no one else does. Can I ask, at times have there been times where you thought about ditching magic entirely? Because
oh God, yes.
Yeah. How have you found a balance in your life to, obviously, when there's so much crap around in magic, I'm just going to be blunt, there is so many people who don't do anything creative. I can tell, and it must depress you a bit, Ben.
Well, it doesn't now, because I don't have that influence. That was the main decision. As I think a long time ago, I think, what is it that I love about magic? What are the things that I loved when I first got into it? And what are the things that kind of somehow irritate me? And all the things that irritate me were this constant stream of pure shit that was just constantly. I mean, obviously there's also some brilliant stuff. There are people doing fantastic things, but you have to wade through so much bilge in order to get to something of any value. By the time you do that, you're left with a lot of stains. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of baggage to that process. And I felt that all of that bilge influences you. It does. And so I just thought, I'll cut it out. And so I did. And instantly, I love it.
Yeah.
And so I'm not, and the thing is, I'll also miss things that are great, but that's okay. Like, if there's a guy doing something at the moment in Brazil, it's the best ever, so-and-so, that's great. I might see it in a few years' time. I'll see it when no one else is looking at it.
Yeah.
So at the point where I see it, I won't be in the same mindset as everyone else. So I often try and read books that I think no one in the world is reading. So I never read books when they come out, ever. I don't even know about them for a start, but occasionally it will filter through somehow, or someone will tell me. But I don't. I just sit down and think, what book right now do I think nobody in the world is reading? I'll read that book, because then my brain is in a different place. So I'm constantly trying to do that. And sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. Whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's just a process I find quite interesting. If you're reading a book and you feel no one's looking at this, it feels interesting.
We've talked a lot about your techniques and your beliefs and things like that. Can we talk a little bit about you as a performer?
No.
Actually, I'm going to anyway, because I'm good at asking tough questions, as my listeners know. Actually, I'm interested to know what is your perfect situation as a performer, Ben? When are you most happy? Is it when you're sat at a card table? Is it when you're, stood up, or you're with some people you don't know? Where is Ben Earl happiest as a performer?
It's a really, really good question. And again, that changes over time. It's a strange thing, because I think in some respects, the best type of magic in the world is impromptu, when it's a bit dark. Maybe you're at outside and there's candlelight, and there's some kind of light bulb situated in trees, and everyone's had a little bit of alcohol, and the subject somehow comes up, and then magic organically happens in that moment. That is one of the most beautiful forms of magic, but you can't really build a living off of that. It's not a business model. It's not a way to earn a living. It's not a commercial structure. But nevertheless, I think there is something quite beautiful in that moment. There's also about putting on your own show and being in complete control of that, and having an audience that are coming in and paying to be a part of that process, and you can create that. That's also great. I don't know. I go in and out of phases of enjoying certain environments. Sometimes there's an environment that's challenging, and so I'll enjoy it because it's challenging. And then after I've got over that challenge, I realise that actually the environment's not conducive to really good magic, or I don't enjoy it. So I go in and out. I think all forms of magic in all forms of environments teach you something. There is a different set of needs and requirements, and advantages and disadvantages, or compromises. And I think there are ways to enjoy all of them. But it's a really difficult question. I suppose if I had to, because I can sense you kind of wanting a definite answer, I think the show that I've enjoyed the most was probably what I did a show with Rune Clan out in Copenhagen, and we had a guitarist who came on in the beginning, and he did 10 minutes, and was singing and talking to the crowd and playing and stuff, and it was great, got the crowd warmed up. And then Rune came on and did half an hour, and then I came on and did half an hour or 40 minutes or something, and we did 10 shows in 7 days, and I think I probably enjoyed that run of shows more than anything else, because it wasn't just about the show itself. It was about the process of every day, day in, day out. We were waking up in the morning, going out for lunch, and then we were thinking about the show, doing the show, having the show, going out, then drinking and having meals, talking about it, going in the next day and doing it again, and the whole way through that process, playing jokes on each other, trying to mess each other's sets up a bit. I was doing this thing at the time where I was doing loads of shots that I had full of water, not to get pissed, but obviously they kept filling them with vodka. So the amount of times where they'd bring them on, and I would take the first one and go, oh God, I've got to do 10 shots of vodka. So I was having to smash 10 shots of vodka in the middle of a show. But that process I found so enjoyable. I don't know.
More enjoyable than when you did your solo shows in London?
Well, I mean, again, that was a different thing. But my aim with that was to try and do an hour with nothing but a deck of cards. That was my aim, to structure no set, nothing, no table, nothing, just a deck and my clothes. And I thought, well, how can I structure a show to have a sense of it building towards something if you've got nothing? Work with extreme limitation, and I limited myself on purpose, just to see what it felt like. And so that process taught me a huge amount. So in doing that, if you can do it, and if someone said to you now, right, go and do an hour, stand there, you've got nothing. If you want a chair or a table or anything, you have to borrow it. Anything, you've got nothing, just this, go. If you can do that for an hour, all of a sudden when you have to do 10 minutes somewhere, it's very easy.
That's great. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Right, so that process for me was about challenge. And so it was about putting myself in an environment where I could make it the most difficult, So, but again, I'd never connected to commercial interest. I'm always just about trying to find a process to learn, find a process to get better.
I know you don't listen to the podcast because you don't consume any magic content, but we end every episode with the same question, and it's,
okay.
What do you think is the biggest problem with magic today, and do you have a solution? Can it be fixed?
The most challenging issue is for people getting into magic, because there is so much influence. They've got access to everything. When you have access to everything at the touch of a button, how do you discover who you are as a performer, what you want to look at? How can you be in control of your own artistic development when there is so much influence around you? I mean, you know, when I was into magic, you know, I had to read books, and then I had to go on some kind of go to Mordor to find this book, and then it wasn't in that one, and someone said the reference was actually it's a book you've got to get from the States. How do you do that? You know, it was a crazy process just to learn a move that maybe was in that particular issue of Epilogue or not, that had only been told to you by someone that apparently knew. It sounds mad, but in that process you ended up consuming a lot of other material, and it was kind of an interesting journey. Nowadays there's so much stuff that, I mean, there's also massive benefits to that. There's a huge benefit to that, but I do think it's a real challenge to work out how you can remain in control and direct what you want to kind of be or become, or what you want to look at, what you want to develop. It's very, very difficult when there is so much around you. So I think that's, I don't know if it's, you know, for me it's also a very, very simple solution to that, which if you become aware of that as a potential problem, you can choose to reduce the amount you consume. So it's a very simple process. But nevertheless, I think just by creating the awareness, if someone goes, oh, I don't care, I want to consume everything, great, good. But you should at least be aware that it is a choice you have. You know, you do have a choice over your level of engagement. You know, maybe just think about it for 5 minutes. Yeah.
Ben, this has been terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming all the way to where I live, so I haven't had to move.
That's all right. Thank you so much. There you have it, a thought-provoking, fantastic hour with Ben Earl. Thank you so much for meeting me, Ben. It was a huge honour to have you on the Magicians podcast. If you'd like to find out more about his magic, visit his website, benjaminearl.com, subscribe to his email list, and that way you will be kept up to date with his upcoming Neo Movement workshops. I saw some of what was discussed in action after I turned the microphone off. Ben showed me a very, very simple trick which totally blew my mind because I didn't see the move. It's really, really hard to explain, but I promise you it's worth finding out more about. So visit the website and subscribe to his email list right now, and visit a workshop as soon as you can. It's time for me to ride off into the sunset and wrap this podcast up, but before I do, rest assured we will be back again next Friday for another brand new episode of the Magicians Podcast. I'm Richard Young. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great week. Bye-bye.